A billionaire tested a black waitress with a question about money, but her answer exposed secrets that could destroy them both. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Like, comment, and subscribe to see what happens next. Let's begin. I'll take the filet, rare, and a recommendation on what to do with $10 billion. Josh Martin didn't glance up from his phone, his silver cufflinks catching the crystal chandelier's glow. June Combs stood perfectly still, burgundy apron pressed against her white blouse. After 9 hours serving Washington's elite at Hamilton and Ivy, this was precisely the kind of test she didn't need. "I'm sorry, sir," she said evenly, "but that's not on our menu." Josh finally looked up, expecting to see intimidation. Instead, he found calm, intelligent dark eyes assessing him with something close to recognition. "Humor me," he said, tapping a black card against white linen. "You've got $1 billion to invest. What do you do with it?" June's coworkers had warned her about him. Josh Martin, 45, defense tech billionaire worth $12 billion, known for his government contracts and habit of testing people when bored. Honestly? She met his gaze directly. "I'd reinvest in integrity first. It yields the best long-term returns. After that, renewable infrastructure in neglected economies, debt forgiveness, micro-initiatives with transparent oversight, and ethical technology startups with community accountability built into their charters. Keep 10% liquid for strategic acquisitions when markets overcorrect." The smirk froze on Josh's face. He set his phone down for the first time that evening. "That's not waitress small talk," he said slowly. "That's strategy." "Was it?" June kept her expression neutral, professional mask locked in place. "Now, about your actual order." "Wait." Josh leaned forward, suddenly focused. "Explain the integrity investment." June glanced at her other tables, then back. "I have customers waiting, Mr. Martin." "They can wait." His tone carried the weight of someone accustomed to rearranging reality. "5 minutes. I'll make it worth your time." "I could lose my job." Josh looked around, then gestured to the maitre d'. "Antoine, I'm borrowing Ms. Combs," June supplied quietly. "Ms. Combs for a brief consultation." "Any issues?" Antoine's eyes widened. "Of course not, Mr. Martin. Take all the time you need." June reluctantly lowered herself into the opposite chair, setting her order pad aside. "This is inappropriate." "So was your uncomfortably precise answer." Josh studied her face like she was a contract with hidden clauses. "Where does that kind of analysis come from? MBA? Consulting background?" "Something like that." She straightened the silverware, avoiding his gaze. "Does it matter? You asked a question." I answered. "Georgetown? Wharton?" "You're assuming waitresses can't read the Financial Times." Instead of offense, Josh laughed. A surprised, genuine sound. "Fair. You caught me being arrogant, but that wasn't reading comprehension. That was insider fluency." He tilted his head. "The neglected economies angle is interesting, but why lead with integrity?" June hesitated only briefly. "Because most of your peers invest in systems that require corruption to function profitably. They call it navigating regulatory environments or relationship building. What it actually means is paying people to look the other way." She held his gaze. "Real returns come from investments that don't need darkness to grow." Josh's expression shifted, something between discomfort and fascination. That wasn't just informed opinion. It was accusation delivered as analysis. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. "Just a waitress with opinions, Mr. Martin." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Now, can I take your actual order, or would you prefer to continue interrogating me about my reading habits?" Josh studied her for a long moment. There was a story here, buried deliberately. He recognized the architecture of concealment when he saw it. "Filet rare, asparagus. And your full name? I'd like to know who just lectured me on ethics." "June Combs. I'll put that order in right away." As she walked away, Josh found himself watching her with an attention usually reserved for due diligence reports. The economy of her movements, the quiet authority she carried despite the service uniform. Most of the people in his orbit competed for his attention. This woman seemed determined to escape it. Josh pulled out his phone and opened an encrypted message app. "Need deep background, June Combs, Hamilton and Ivy server. Priority Alpha. The response came within 30 seconds. On it. Preliminary by 0600. He put the phone away just as June returned with his sparkling water. Your meal will be ready shortly, Mr. Martin. Josh, he corrected. And thank you, June. Something flickered in her expression. Surprise, perhaps. Or recognition, before she nodded and moved to her next table. Throughout his meal, Josh's attention kept tracking back to her. She moved through the dining room with practiced grace, managing demanding customers and deflecting a drunk lobbyist's advances with surgical precision. When she brought his check, Josh added a $5,000 tip to his $300 meal. June's eyes widened fractionally. This is excessive. Consider it a consulting fee, which, by the way, was better than what I get from half my advisory board. I can't accept this. You can. You will. His tone was firm but not unkind, and I'd like to continue our conversation professionally. I have a proposition for someone with your unexpected fluency. June hesitated, then slid the leather portfolio with his card and receipt back across the table. I don't think that's appropriate, Mr. Martin. Scared? Cautious. There's a difference. Fair enough. He pulled out a business card and wrote a number on the back. When you change your mind, call me. If I change my mind, she corrected, taking the card with obvious reluctance. Josh smiled. Trust me, it's when. Josh stopped on the sidewalk outside Hamilton and Ivy, rereading the message on his phone. June Combs, 25. No history before 3 years ago. Flag, professional erasure. What he didn't know was that 3 years ago, June Combs hadn't existed at all. 3 years ago, she'd been June Barrett, a name that once opened doors in the Department of Energy, that appeared on classified economic reports, that was whispered in congressional hallways with respect, until the day she discovered where the money was really going and refused to make the numbers lie. The leather interior of Josh's town car smelled like money. Italian leather, subtle cologne, the faint scent of expensive bourbon. He barely noticed anymore. His fingers moved across his phone's encrypted interface with practiced efficiency, pulling up the background request he'd submitted 40 minutes ago. Intelligence gathering wasn't personal for Josh Martin. It was workflow. A data set to be queried, patterns to be extracted, insights to be weaponized. Over the years, he'd refined the process to a science. Identify the target, authorize the sweep, review the findings, make the decision. People became spreadsheets. Mysteries became manageable variables. The preliminary report loaded on his screen as the car glided past the Lincoln Memorial. He read it twice. Subject: Combs, June Diab, listed as 03-15-2000, SSN, issued 2022 employment. History: 3 years, Hamilton and Ivy, 2 prior service positions. Credit history: thin, first credit card opened 2022. Criminal record: on education, no records found. Prior addresses: none. Social media: minimal. Generic profiles: no historical posts. Josh's jaw tightened. The report was a void dressed as a person. Either she was a ghost, someone manufactured from nothing, or she was hiding from something. People didn't just materialize at age 22 with no digital footprint, not in an era where kindergarten photos live forever online. He replayed the conversation in his head, hearing her voice again. Debt forgiveness, micro-initiatives with transparent oversight. That wasn't Investopedia vocabulary. That was policy speak, bureaucratic fluency. The kind of language people learned in conference rooms with security clearances, not community colleges. Most of your peers invest in systems that require corruption to function profitably. Not, I've read that corruption exists, but your peers, language that positioned her as an observer from inside the same circles, not outside looking in. Josh opened a new message to his lead security analyst. Run level 3, full digital archaeology. I want deleted accounts, name variations, facial recognition against government databases. Off the books, priority alpha, timeline, 6 hours. The car pulled up to his building, a glass tower in Georgetown where penthouses started at $12 million. Josh stepped out, nodding to the doorman, his mind already 3 steps ahead. The elevator ride to the 32nd floor was silent except for the faint hum of machinery. His penthouse office overlooked the Potomac, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the monuments that represented the government he'd learned to profit from. Josh poured 2 fingers of Macallan 25 and stood at the glass, watching the lights shimmer on dark water. 15 years ago, he'd been a mid-tier defense contractor with a good product and better timing. A software platform that promised to revolutionize intelligence logistics for overseas operations. The Pentagon needed efficiency. Congress needed wins. Josh delivered both, on time, under budget, with enough plausible deniability built into the architecture that uncomfortable questions never got asked. He told himself it was patriotism, national security, protecting American interests. And when the contracts grew from millions to hundreds of millions, when his name started appearing on Forbes lists and Senate hearing invitations, he told himself he'd earned it through innovation and risk. He didn't think about the audit reports that got softened, the procurement officers who retired early with consulting contracts, the foreign accounts that facilitated logistics coordination in ways the official budgets never acknowledged. Josh had learned the first rule of government contracting: don't ask questions that make sleeping difficult. Build the system they want. Take the money. Let someone else worry about the moral architecture. His phone vibrated. He glanced down, expecting a response from his analyst. Instead, the screen displayed a different alert. An automated deep search hit from a secondary database his team maintained for high-level background checks. Potential match found. Cross-reference Energy Department Personnel Archives, restricted access. Name variation, Barrett, June M. Employment, Department of Energy, Economic Analytics Division, 2020-222. Status, access revoked. Reason, redacted. Clearance, secret, terminated. Notes, subject of internal investigation. File sealed per director authority. Josh's hand stopped halfway to his mouth, the glass of whiskey forgotten. He set it down carefully on the desk and read the alert again, his pulse accelerating. June Barrett. He whispered the name aloud, testing it. Then he pulled up the Hamilton and Ivy reservation system he'd quietly accessed months ago for exactly this kind of due diligence. June Combs, 25 years old. But if she'd worked for DOE from 2020 to 22, she would have needed at least a bachelor's degree, which meant college from 2016 to 2020, which meant she was older than 25, or the birth date was fabricated. Josh's mind raced through the implications. Department of Energy, Economic Analytics, secret clearance, access revoked. And tonight she'd lectured him about corruption in government contracting with the precision of someone who'd seen the invoices. His reflection stared back at him from the dark window. A man who'd spent 15 years building an empire on the assumption that buried things stayed buried. June Barrett had been buried, but she'd just walked back into his life carrying a tray of sparkling water and an answer that sounded like an indictment. Josh picked up his phone and typed a new message. Expand search, June Barrett, DO, 2020-22. I want everything, personnel files, security reviews, termination records. Find out why she disappeared. He hit send and returned to the window, watching the monuments glow against the night sky. For the first time in years, Josh Martin wondered if he really wanted to know the truth. June noticed the surveillance during the 7 o'clock seating. 2 men at table 16 ordered the cheapest appetizers and nursed mineral water for 90 minutes, their eyes tracking her movements with disciplined precision. Not hungry diners. Watchers. She'd seen the type before, in hearings, in hallways outside secured offices, in the parking garages where careers went to die. By closing, the drizzle had started. June changed out of her service flats and into sneakers, pulled her coat tight, and slipped out the back entrance into the alley behind Hamilton and Ivy. The smell of restaurant grease and wet pavement hung in the cool air. Dumpsters lined the brick wall. A single security light cast yellow pools on the asphalt. The black sedan idling at the alley's mouth confirmed what she already knew. She was 10 steps from the street when Josh Martin stepped out of the shadows near the kitchen door, hands in the pockets of his tailored overcoat. June stopped but didn't startle. Following servers home is a crime, Mr. Martin, even for billionaires. I wasn't following you home. Josh moved into the light, raindrops speckling his shoulders. I was waiting to talk. There's a difference. Curiosity isn't the same as conscience. June kept her distance, measuring the space between them and the street. Whatever you think you're looking for, stop looking. I think you know I can't do that. His voice was calm, reasonable, the tone of someone accustomed to negotiating from strength. Not after tonight, not after you spoke like someone who's read OMB circulars for breakfast. June's expression didn't change, but internally alarm bells rang. OMB, Office of Management and Budget, insider vocabulary. He was fishing, but with the right bait. I read widely, she said evenly. It's called being informed. June, Josh took a step closer. I'm actually a preliminary check. You don't exist before 3 years ago. No credit history, no educational records, no digital footprint. That's not informed, that's deliberate erasure. Then maybe you should ask yourself why someone would need to disappear. Her voice hardened, and whether digging into that answer is worth what you might find. I'm offering you something better than disappearing. Josh pulled his hands from his pockets, palms open in a gesture of openness. I want to talk about clean procurement, real reform. You clearly understand the systems. I have the resources and access. We could fix things? June's laugh was sharp, bitter. Let me guess. You want to launch an initiative. Maybe hire me as a consultant so you can tell shareholders you're committed to ethical oversight. Put my face in a press release under diversity and compliance. Josh flinched. That's not what I'm suggesting. Then what are you suggesting, Mr. Martin? June stepped closer now, her voice low and dangerous. Because I know exactly who you are. Martin Systems. DoD contracts worth $900 million in FY21 alone. DARPA partnerships. Intelligence infrastructure. You built an empire on FAR loopholes and DCAA audits that somehow always come back favorable. The acronyms landed like precision strikes. FAR, Federal Acquisition Regulation. DCAA, Defense Contract Audit Agency. Language only insiders used, spoken with the fluency of someone who'd lived inside the machine. Josh's eyes narrowed. Who are you? Someone who knows better than to accept coffee from people who profit from the problems they claim to want to solve. June adjusted her bag on her shoulder. You want absolution, Mr. Martin? Hire a priest. You want a token, black woman to make your corporate social responsibility page look good? Hire an actress. But don't insult me by pretending this is about reform. It's not about optics. Josh's voice carried an edge now, frustration cracking through his polish. I'm trying to sleep better, June finished. Buy your way into feeling like a good person. I've met men like you before. They all think money can fix what money broke. It can't. The rain picked up, pattering against metal dumpsters. Josh ran a hand through his hair, droplets catching in the gray at his temples. You're angry, I get it. But anger without action is just noise. If you actually want to change something... I tried changing things once. June's voice went quiet, cold. The system buried me for it. Men like you made sure of that. The words hung between them like an accusation and a confession all at once. Josh stared at her, pieces clicking into place. June Barrett, he said softly. Department of Energy, Economic Analytics. You tried to expose misallocated defense funds 3 years ago. June's face went carefully blank. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Josh's voice was gentler now, almost respectful. And for what it's worth, I'm sorry. I didn't know at the time. Didn't know or didn't care? June cut him off. My name is June Combs. I serve steaks and take orders. That's all you need to know. She turned to leave, but Josh called after her. They're going to come for you anyway. If I found you, others will. Let me help. June stopped but didn't turn around. You can't help me, Mr. Martin. You are the problem. She walked away into the rain, leaving Josh standing alone in the alley. 20 minutes later, June stood in the employee locker room, shaking water from her coat. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The space smelled like bleach and old coffee. She spun her combination lock, 17, 32, 9, and pulled open the metal door. A plain manila envelope sat on top of her folded scarf. June's breath caught. She looked around the empty room, then carefully lifted the envelope. No markings, no postage. Hand-delivered. With trembling fingers, she opened it. Inside was a single photograph, grainy but unmistakable. Her old Department of Energy badge. The lanyard. Her face 3 years younger, hair pulled back, wearing a white blouse and navy blazer. The name printed clearly below her photo, June M. Barrett. Beneath the photo, a handwritten note in block letters, "We remember." June's hands shook as she stared at the message. The locker room suddenly felt too small, the walls closing in. Someone had been in here. Someone new. Not just her old name, but where she worked now, which locker was hers, her schedule. She shoved the envelope into her bag, slammed the locker shut, and walked quickly toward the exit, her heart hammering against her ribs. Outside, the rain had turned to a steady downpour. June pulled up her hood and disappeared into the wet D.C. night, the weight of her past pressing down like the storm clouds overhead. Behind her, in a car she didn't notice, someone lowered a camera and typed a message. Target confirmed, she has the package. Proceeding to phase 2. June's studio apartment in Anacostia was small enough that she could touch both walls from the center of the room. Cheap Venetian blinds, a futon that doubled as her couch, a hot plate on a counter barely wide enough for a cutting board. But it was hers, purchased with cash under a name that didn't trigger alerts, and for 3 years that had been enough. Tonight it felt like a trap. She locked the door, deadbolt, chain, door brace, and set the envelope on the tiny kitchen counter under the harsh LED light. The photograph stared back at her. June M. Barrett, a woman who no longer existed, except in the memories of people who wanted her to stay buried. 4 years ago. The conference room at the Department of Energy's Forrestal building had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the National Mall. June Barrett sat at the long table with her laptop open, presenting her quarterly analysis to a room of senior officials whose combined security clearances could access nuclear launch codes. The discrepancy is here. She clicked to a slide showing fund allocations across 17 private defense contractors. DOE economic modeling shows consistent misalignment between reported project costs and actual deliverables. We're talking about $3.2 billion in defense appropriations over 18 months that can't be accounted for through standard procurement metrics. A deputy director leaned forward. Which contractors? June advanced the slide. Names appeared. Lockheed, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman. And near the bottom, Martin Systems. These vendors receive funds ostensibly for renewable energy infrastructure tied to military installations. But the energy output data doesn't match the investment. Either the technology failed at statistically impossible rates, or the money went somewhere else. Silence filled the room. Her supervisor, Thomas Reichert, cleared his throat. June, this is preliminary data. We should smooth the model before presenting conclusions that could smooth the model. June looked at him. You mean falsify it? I mean contextualize it. His voice hardened. Defense procurement is complex. There are classified elements you're not cleared to. I'm cleared for secret. These are economic analytics, not operational details. June stood her ground. If money's being misallocated, we're obligated to report it. Reichert's jaw tightened. We'll discuss this privately. 3 weeks later, June sat across from Reichert in his office while he slid a revised report across his desk. Her name was still on it. Her analysis was not. Sign it, he said flatly. This isn't what I submitted. It's what the department needs. He leaned back. You're talented, June. You have a future here. Don't throw it away over numbers that don't tell the whole story. They tell exactly the story someone doesn't want told. June pushed the report back. I won't sign it. Reichert's expression went cold. Then you're done. 2 weeks after that, June Barrett's credentials stopped working. Her emails bounced. Her access to federal databases vanished. When she tried to appeal through official channels, she was told there was no record of disciplinary action and therefore nothing to appeal. Her fiancé, Marcus Webb, a legislative aide on the Senate Armed Services Committee, sat across from her in their shared apartment in Arlington. You need to let this go, he said quietly. Let it go? June stared at him. Marcus, we're talking about billions in taxpayer money being funneled. We're talking about your career being over if you keep pushing. He wouldn't meet her eyes. Mine too, by association. So that's it? You're choosing your combo over what's right? Marcus stood, grabbing his coat. I'm choosing survival. You should too. He walked out. 3 days later, his belongings were gone. June blinked, the memory dissolving back into her small apartment. She'd lost everything that year. Her career, her reputation, her relationship, her name. June Barrett had been erased as thoroughly as if she'd never existed. The woman who remained had to rebuild from nothing, taking the surname of her grandmother, who'd passed years before, creating a new identity through channels that didn't ask questions if you paid in cash. She'd told herself it was over, that staying invisible meant staying safe. But the envelope proved otherwise. Someone remembered. Someone was watching. And Josh Martin's sudden appearance wasn't coincidence. It was convergence. His digging had triggered something, or someone had been waiting for her to surface. June picked up her phone, weighing options. Josh's business card sat on the counter. He had resources, connections, the kind of power that could either bury her deeper or force the truth into daylight. But trusting a man who'd profited from the system she tried to expose felt like trusting the knife that had already cut her. Her phone buzzed, unknown number. June's pulse quickened as she opened the message. You were right about the money, meet, or the ledger dies. June stared at the screen. The ledger. She'd kept copies, encrypted, hidden across 3 digital dead drops she'd set up before her credentials were revoked. Insurance in case she ever needed proof. But no one should have known they existed. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Every instinct screamed trap. But if someone had the ledger or knew where it was, staying silent meant losing the only evidence that could vindicate what she'd sacrificed. She typed back, where? The response came instantly. Lincoln Memorial, East Steps, midnight. Come alone or I disappear forever. June checked the time, 11:17 p.m., 43 minutes. She grabbed her coat, shoved the envelope into her bag, and paused at the door. Her reflection stared back from the dark window. June Combs, waitress, invisible woman. But underneath, June Barrett was still alive, still angry, still holding the truth someone had tried to bury. She unlocked the deadbolt and stepped into the night. The cafe near Union Station was the kind of place where power brokers held conversations they couldn't afford to have recorded. No cameras, cash only. Booths with high wooden backs that swallowed sound. Josh had reserved the corner booth at 2 in the morning, paying the owner enough to guarantee privacy and amnesia. June arrived exactly on time, her coat still damp from the earlier rain. She didn't sit immediately. Instead, she stood at the edge of the booth, assessing exits, angles, whether Josh had brought company hidden in the shadows. I'm alone, Josh said quietly, gesturing to the empty bench across from him. As requested. June slid into the seat but kept her bag on her lap, one hand inside. Josh noticed but said nothing. If she was armed, he couldn't blame her. I have conditions, June said with a preamble. If we're doing this, whatever this is, I'm not your employee, not your consultant, not a line item on your corporate responsibility budget. Josh nodded slowly. What do you want? Parity. Written protections that can't be voided by confidentiality clauses or NDAs. And I decide what gets released and when. You don't get to bury inconvenient truths because they threaten your stock price. Her voice was steel wrapped in silk. I control the release valves, or I walk. Josh had spent 15 years negotiating contracts worth hundreds of millions. He recognized non-negotiable terms when he heard them. Agreed. I'll have my attorney draft something that protects you under whistleblower statutes. Public Interest Disclosure Act provisions, immunity from retaliation claims, and an escrow account you control. June's eyes narrowed. Why would you agree to that? It gives you no leverage. Because I'm tired of leverage, Josh said simply. And because you're right, I profited from a system that's broken. Maybe I can't fix all of it, but I can start by not making it worse. He met her gaze. Consult, advise. Help me fix what I broke. For a long moment, June studied him, searching for the con, the angle, the trap. She'd learned the hard way that powerful men rarely meant what they said when the truth became expensive. But something in Josh's expression, exhaustion maybe, or genuine regret, made her hesitate. "The ledgers I copied," she said carefully, "they're encrypted across multiple dead drops. Financial models showing procurement discrepancies, vendor payment chains, timeline mismatches between reported deliverables and actual outputs. Enough to map where the money really went. Can you authenticate them? Prove chain of custody? If you can get me access to current Martin Systems invoicing data, I can cross-reference and validate, show the pattern isn't isolated, it's systematic." June leaned forward. "But I need to see you're serious. No redactions. No protecting your people when the evidence points to them." Josh pulled out his phone and opened an encrypted folder. He slid the device across the table. "Internal invoice chain, fiscal year 2021. Project Atlas, a DOE renewable energy contract worth $240 million. My COO, Richard Vance, signed off on deliverables that don't exist. Equipment that was never installed. Infrastructure assessments that were fabricated." June picked up the phone, scrolling through the documents. Her heart rate accelerated as she recognized the patterns, the same procurement code structures she'd flagged 4 years ago, refined and expanded. "This implicates you directly. You're the CEO, ultimate signature authority." "I know," Josh's voice was quiet, "which is why I'm showing it to you. I didn't sign those specific documents, but I built the system that made them possible. I hired Vance. I created the oversight gaps." He paused. "If fixing this means I go down too, I'm ready for that." June looked up sharply. Men like Josh Martin didn't volunteer for accountability. They bought it off, buried it under settlements, restructured and rebranded. But here he sat, offering evidence that could destroy him. She set the phone down and pulled out her laptop, a modified air-gapped system she'd built herself. "I'm going to decrypt one of the ledger fragments. You're going to see what I saw 4 years ago." Her fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced precision, navigating through encryption layers, biometric verifications, and geographic spoofing protocols. Josh watched silently, realizing he was witnessing tradecraft that went far beyond academic analysis. After 3 minutes, a spreadsheet populated on screen. Rows of data, dates, vendor names, amounts, authorization codes, discrepancy percentages. June pointed to a highlighted section. March 21, Martin Systems received $87 million for energy grid upgrades at Fort Bragg, Fort Hood, and Camp Pendleton. DOE energy output data shows grid capacity increased by 12% across those installations. Based on technology costs and labor, that should have cost $43 million, maybe 50, with contingencies. "Where did the other $37 million go?" Josh asked, though he already suspected. June scrolled down to Shell consulting firms, logistics coordination, environmental impact assessments, community outreach initiatives. All vendors that exist on paper but have no employees, no office space, no deliverables beyond invoices. She looked at him. "This is one contract. I found 17 others with identical patterns. Different vendors, same structures, same disappearing funds." Josh's jaw tightened as he read the names on screen. Some he recognized. Others were ghosts he'd never bothered to investigate because the contracts came through channels that were supposed to be vetted. June rotated the laptop so he could see clearly. March 15th, 2021. Authorization signature, R. Vance. Secondary approval, J. Martin. Amount, $87 million. Actual value delivered, $43 million. Systematic siphoning, $44 million. The evidence stared back at him in black and white. Names, dates, amounts. Proof that his empire was built on a foundation of systematic theft dressed as patriotic service. Josh looked up at June, her face illuminated by the laptop's glow. "What do we do with this?" "We build the case," June said quietly. "All of it, every contract, every ghost vendor, every signature, and then we decide who needs to see it and whether you're ready to lose everything to make it right." Josh nodded slowly. For the first time in 15 years, he felt like he was making a decision his younger self might respect. "Let's get started." The first hit appeared on a Reddit thread at 6:47 a.m. Hamilton and Ivy waitress claiming to be financial expert. Service staff fabulous trying to scam billionaire. By noon, it had migrated to Twitter, then LinkedIn, complete with grainy photos of June in her burgundy apron, her face circled in red. June scrolled through her phone, watching the smear campaign metastasize in real time. Anonymous accounts with AI-generated profile pictures, coordinated posting times, language that sounded like it had been workshopped by a PR crisis team. She's a nobody looking for a payout. Probably couldn't even balance a checkbook. Another diversity hire trying to play victim. The posts were designed to do exactly what they were doing. Make her doubt herself, isolate her, paint her as unreliable before anyone took her claims seriously. June set down her phone and opened her laptop. If they wanted a fight, she'd give them one backed by irrefutable data. The emergency board meeting had been called with 48 hours notice. Josh sat at the head of the long mahogany table, facing 12 directors whose collective net worth exceeded most national GDPs. His COO, Richard Vance, sat 3 seats down, expression carefully neutral. Board chair Patricia Holloway leaned forward, her diamonds catching the recessed lighting. Josh, we need to discuss your recent associations. The waitress, the background investigation. Social media is having a field day. Her name is June Combs, Josh said evenly, and she's consulting on procurement and compliance. She's a waitress, Vance interjected, his voice dripping with condescension. With no credentials, no verifiable background, and apparently a talent for making inflammatory accusations. Distance yourself from her before this becomes a liability we can't contain. Josh looked at Vance, seeing him clearly for the first time. Not a trusted lieutenant, but a man who'd built a career on Josh's willingness to look the other way. I've reviewed Project Atlas. Your signatures are on deliverables that don't exist. Care to explain that? The room went silent. Vance's face reddened. Those contracts were executed according to standard protocols. If you're questioning my integrity based on the word of someone serving appetizers, I'm questioning your integrity based on $44 million in ghost expenditures, Josh interrupted, and I'm putting you on administrative leave pending a full audit. Patricia's expression hardened. Josh, this is reckless. If you're serious about this investigation, it needs to be handled quietly. Internal review, no outside consultants, certainly not a waitress with an agenda. The agenda is accountability, Josh said flatly. Something we should have prioritized years ago. June had just left a supply vendor meeting, her cover story for why she was wandering professional corridors, when she saw him. Marcus Webb, her former fiancé, standing by a coffee cart with the studied casualness of someone who'd been waiting. He looked exactly as she remembered. Tailored suit, Yale law ring, the smooth confidence of someone who'd never had to choose between principles and comfort. June, he approached with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Or is it still Barrett? I heard you changed it. What do you want, Marcus? To talk, as a friend. He gestured to a bench near the Capitol building. 5 minutes. Against her better judgment, June followed. They sat with careful distance between them. I heard you were working with Josh Martin, Marcus said quietly. Stirring up old investigations. June, some fights you don't win. You learned that once. Don't make me watch you learn it again. Is that concern or a threat? Both. Marcus turned to face her. I'm a senior counsel now. Armed Services Committee. I see things you don't. There's a closed-door review coming. DHS, DOJ, Defense Appropriations Oversight. They want this buried, June, all of it. If you push, they'll crush you, and this time there won't be anywhere to hide. June held his gaze. Then I'll make sure the truth goes public before they can bury it. They'll destroy you, Marcus said softly. Your reputation, your credibility, your life. Again, is that really what you want? What I want, June said standing, is to sleep without wondering if I sold my conscience for safety. You should try it sometime. She walked away, leaving Marcus on the bench with the ghost of choices he'd never had the courage to unmake. Josh's phone buzzed with an encrypted message from his DHS liaison. a contact he'd cultivated over years of defense contracting. Closed-door appropriations review. Thursday, they're making this disappear. Advise you distance from Combs immediately. Your exposure is minimal if you cooperate. Josh stared at the message for a long moment. The path forward was clear. Cut ties with June, let the review committee bury the investigation, keep his empire intact. It was what he'd always done. Survive by knowing when to retreat. He typed a response. No, preparing testimony packets. Will cooperate fully but on the record. The reply came instantly. You're committing professional suicide. Josh smiled grimly and typed back. Better than moral death. He pulled up his company directory and composed an executive order. Effective immediately, the Acquisitions and Special Projects Division is suspended pending external audit. All personnel placed on administrative leave. Richard Vance terminated for cause. His finger hovered over send. This would trigger chaos, resignations, investigations, stock volatility, lawsuits. Everything he'd built would be under scrutiny. He hit send. June's fingers flew across her keyboard, finalizing the encryption protocols. Every ledger she'd reconstructed, every invoice Josh had provided, every timeline discrepancy that proved systematic fraud, all of it compiled into a single devastating document. She uploaded it to a distributed vault, fragments scattered across servers in Iceland, Switzerland, and Singapore. Then she configured the dead man's switch. If she didn't check in every 72 hours, the files would auto-release to pre-selected journalists, congressional investigators, and public transparency organizations. Her phone buzzed. Josh. Vance is out, board is furious, but we're committed. You ready for what comes next? June typed back. I've been ready for 4 years. Ledger uploaded with dead man's switch. If they come for us, the truth goes public. Josh's response was immediate. Then let's make sure we're standing when it does. June closed her laptop and looked out the window at the city lights. Somewhere out there, powerful people were making phone calls, strategizing containment, calculating how to neutralize the threat she and Josh represented. But for the first time since she'd lost everything, June Barrett wasn't afraid. She was ready. The hearing room was smaller than Josh had expected. Wood-paneled walls, a curved dais where 7 senators sat like judges, and no windows. Closed-door congressional reviews were designed to protect sensitive information. But Josh knew the truth. They were designed to protect powerful people from accountability. Senator Raymond Kruger, chair of the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee, adjusted his microphone. This session is classified. All remarks are subject to confidentiality protocols. Mr. Martin, you requested this review. Explain. Josh stood, hands folded before him. 3 weeks ago, I was made aware of systematic procurement irregularities in Department of Energy defense contracts dating back 5 years, ghost vendors, fabricated deliverables, approximately $3.7 billion in misallocated funds. His voice was steady. My company, Martin Systems, is implicated. I'm here to provide evidence and cooperate fully with investigation. Senator Patricia Hollis leaned forward, her expression calculating. Mr. Martin, these contracts involve national security infrastructure. Exposing procurement processes could compromise operational security. Have you considered the ramifications? With respect, Senator, national security is already compromised when defense funds are stolen, Josh replied. Alleged, interjected Senator Thomas Bryce. You're making serious accusations without... I have documentation, Josh interrupted. A screen lowered behind him displaying the first invoice chain. Project Atlas, $240 million, equipment never installed, personnel never hired, money routed through shell companies. The room went silent except for the hum of the secure video feed equipment in the corner. We also have a witness, Josh continued, an economist who worked for DOE and discovered these discrepancies 4 years ago. She's testifying remotely under protection. The screen flickered. A voice came through, digitally altered, gender neutral, impossible to identify. My name has been redacted per whistleblower protection protocols. From 20 to 2022, I analyzed procurement data for the Department of Energy's Economic Analytics Division. June's voice, transformed but unmistakable to Josh, was calm, methodical. She walked the committee through 15 minutes of forensic detail, timeline discrepancies, vendor payment patterns, authorization signatures that created deliberate oversight gaps. The model was elegant, June said. Contracts were structured to split oversight between agencies. DOE approved budgets, DOD verified deliverables, but no one cross-referenced. Vendors invoiced both agencies for the same work, doubled their revenue, and neither agency noticed because the data lived in separate systems. Senator Kruger tapped his pen against the desk. These are serious allegations. How do we verify your expertise, your credibility? Silence. I need a name, Kruger pressed. For the record, who are you? More silence. Josh saw the trap closing, discredit the witness, dismiss the evidence, protect the system. Senator Hollis leaned into her microphone. Without verifiable credentials, this testimony is hearsay. Mr. Martin, you're basing corporate sabotage on the word of someone we can't even identify. Josh stood abruptly, his chair scraping against marble. She's the only honest person this government ever buried. The room froze. Her name was June Barrett, Josh continued, his voice carrying the weight of confession. A data scientist, secret clearance. She discovered exactly what I just showed you 4 years ago. When she refused to falsify her findings, DOE revoked her credentials, blacklisted her professionally, and erased her employment record. He looked directly at Senator Kruger. My company, my signatures, are on contracts she tried to expose. I profited from the corruption she sacrificed everything to stop. Pandemonium erupted. Senate counsel huddled frantically. Aides whispered into phones. A junior staffer fumbled papers across the dais. Senator Bryce pounded his gavel. Mr. Martin, you're admitting to federal procurement fraud in a congressional hearing. I'm admitting complicity, Josh interrupted. Willful ignorance that enabled systematic theft. I built systems designed not to ask questions. I hired people who knew how to exploit regulatory gaps. I took the money and convinced myself it was patriotism. His hands gripped the podium. But June Barrett asked questions. She did the job we're supposed to trust government employees to do. And you destroyed her for it. The secure video feed crackled. June's altered voice came through one last time. The full ledger is now uploaded to the Congressional Record Server. 17 contracts, 43 vendors, 112 authorization signatures, including 6 current members of Congress. The room exploded into chaos, senators shouting, lawyers objecting, security guards moving toward exits. Senator Kruger slammed his gavel repeatedly. Order! This session is suspended pending. It's already public, June said calmly. Auto-released to the Washington Post, New York Times, and the Government Accountability Office 30 seconds ago. You can't bury this anymore. Josh watched as phones across the room began vibrating simultaneously. Aides receiving alerts, journalists breaking news. The sealed room suddenly no match for the truth June had just unleashed. Senator Kruger's face went white. This session is terminated, Mr. Martin. You're ordered to surrender all evidence immediately. Already done, Josh said quietly. It's in the hands of people who won't make it disappear. As security moved to escort Josh from the chamber, he caught a glimpse of the video screen. The feed had cut to black, but for just a moment, he'd seen text appear. Thank you for standing up. Josh nodded toward the empty screen and allowed himself to be led away. Outside the hearing room, a DOJ liaison intercepted Josh's attorney. We need a meeting with Mr. Martin today. Immunity discussions, full cooperation in exchange for reduced exposure. Josh's lawyer looked at him questioningly. Josh shook his head. No deals. I testified to the truth. I'll accept the consequences. The liaison's jaw tightened. Then you're looking at indictments within 48 hours. Your assets frozen. Criminal prosecution. You understand that? I understand, Josh said calmly, that for the first time in 15 years, I can sleep without wondering who I betrayed to stay comfortable. He walked down the marble corridor toward whatever came next, knowing that June Barrett, wherever she was, had just done what neither of them could do alone, forced the truth into daylight where it couldn't be buried again. June sat on the east steps of the Lincoln Memorial, watching the sun rise over Washington. The marble beneath her was cold, but she didn't move. Dawn broke in shades of amber and rose, casting long shadows across the reflecting pool where the city's monuments stood silent witness to promises made and broken. She heard footsteps behind her, deliberate, tired. She didn't turn. Figured I'd find you here, Josh said, sitting down beside her with careful distance between them. He looked different. No tailored suit, just jeans and a worn Georgetown sweatshirt. His face was drawn, but his eyes were clearer than she'd ever seen them. The man who'd tested her with arrogant questions about money seemed like someone from another lifetime. Your assets are frozen, June said quietly. It wasn't a question. She'd seen the morning headlines. Billionaire CEO admits complicity in defense fraud. Martin Systems contracts suspended. Criminal charges pending. Everything except a trust fund my grandmother set up that they can't touch. Enough to live on, not enough to buy senators. Josh looked out at the monuments. They're talking about 20 years if I don't cooperate. Will you? I already did. Full testimony, no immunity deal, no protected assets. He leaned back on his hands. My board fired me yesterday. 17 employees resigned in solidarity, the good ones who didn't know what Vance was doing. My lawyer quit because I won't fight the charges. June finally turned to look at him. You lost everything. Josh met her gaze. No, I finally invested in something real. The words hung between them, simple and true. June felt something shift in her chest. Not absolution, but acknowledgement. He'd stood up when it cost him everything. That didn't erase what he'd done, but it mattered. My phone's been ringing nonstop, June said, pulling out her device. Former DOE colleagues, defense analysts, people who saw things but were too afraid to speak. They're sending evidence, invoices, authorization chains, testimony. 12 whistleblowers contacted me overnight. The dam broke, Josh said softly. Your confession broke it. June scrolled through messages. A procurement officer at DARPA, a budget analyst at the Pentagon, a congressional staffer who saw appropriations routed through shell committees. They all stayed silent because they thought they were alone. You showed them they weren't. Josh rubbed his face. What about you, the smear campaign? Still active, but now I have a name again. June Barrett exists in the congressional record. My old credentials are being reviewed for reinstatement. Georgetown Law reached out about teaching a seminar on economic ethics. She smiled faintly. And someone leaked my testimony transcript. The unaltered version. It's trending on 3 platforms. They sat in silence, inventorying the casualties and unexpected gains. Josh's reputation, destroyed. His fortune, frozen. His freedom, uncertain. But the truth was on record now, validated and impossible to bury. So what now, Josh asked. You going back to academia, government work? June shook her head. I've been thinking about something else. A public interest foundation. Independent oversight for procurement transparency. Use the same forensic methods I developed, but make them publicly accessible. Crowdsourced accountability. That's ambitious. It's necessary. June looked at him. This won't be the last time powerful people try to hide money in the gaps. We need infrastructure that makes it harder to steal and easier to expose. Josh nodded slowly. You'd need funding, staff, legal protection, the kind of structure that can survive retaliation. I know. June pulled out her laptop, balancing it on her knees. I've been drafting articles of incorporation, nonprofits, transparent funding sources, board with term limits to prevent capture, whistleblower protections built into the charter. She opened the document, and Josh leaned over to read. The Combs Foundation for Ethical Economics. Mission statement. To weaponize transparency ethically in service of public accountability. Combs, Josh noted, not Barrett. June Barrett tried to work inside the system. It buried her. June's fingers moved across the keyboard. June Combs rebuilt herself from nothing. She knows how to survive. Josh read through the charter quietly. You're going to need an advisor. Someone who knows how contractors hide money. Someone who's done it and wants to make it right. Are you offering to help? I'm offering to learn. Josh's voice was steady. You're the expert. I'm just the guy who finally stopped looking away. But if you'll have me as an equal, not a benefactor, I'll do whatever you need. June studied him for a long moment, weighing trust against history, potential against risk. No salary until the foundation's sustainable, no voting privileges on investigative priorities. And you answer to the board, not the other way around. Deal. June turned back to her laptop and navigated to the D.C. Secretary of State's business portal. She reviewed the incorporation documents one final time. Bylaws, mission statement, conflict of interest policies. Everything designed to be exactly what the system needed and exactly what threatened it. Her cursor hovered over the submit button. Once I file this, there's no going back, June said quietly. Every powerful person we expose will come for us. Every contractor we audit will retaliate. We'll spend years in court, under investigation, fighting battles we might not win. Sounds like Tuesday, Josh said, a hint of his old humor breaking through. June allowed herself a small smile. Then she clicked, File Articles of Incorporation. The screen refreshed, application submitted, confirmation number 2025 NOV 47832, entity name the Combs Foundation for Ethical Economics, status pending review. June closed her laptop and looked back at the sunrise. The monuments glowed gold in the morning light, symbols of democracy built by people who'd believed transparency and accountability mattered more than comfort. You know what's funny? Josh said. 2 weeks ago, I asked you what you'd do with $10 billion. You told me to invest in integrity. And you did, June replied. It just cost more than you expected. Best investment I ever made. They sat together on the steps as the city woke around them. Two people who'd lost everything and found something better than what they'd had. The truth on record and the courage to keep fighting for it. 6 months later, June walked through the doors of Hamilton and Ivy on a quiet Monday evening. The restaurant looked exactly as she remembered. Crystal chandeliers, white linen tablecloths, the muted elegance of power dining in the nation's capital. But she entered through the front door this time, not the employee entrance. Josh was already waiting at a corner booth, the same one where they'd first sat together after his arrogant test question. He stood when he saw her, no longer the billionaire in a tailored suit, but a man in a simple blazer. His silver cufflinks replaced with plain buttons. The transformation ran deeper than wardrobe. You made it, he said, genuine warmth in his voice. Traffic was terrible. June slid into the booth, noticing the familiar weight of the restaurant's atmosphere. But this time, she belonged here as a guest, not as staff. Their server approached. A young woman June recognized from her own time working these tables. The woman's eyes flickered with recognition and something that looked like respect. Ms. Combs, Mr. Martin. Welcome back. June ordered the seared salmon. Josh chose the filet, rare. Some things didn't change. As they waited for their meals, June pulled out her tablet and opened the news aggregator they'd been monitoring together. The headlines scrolled past like a vindication montage. Former DoD procurement chief indicted on fraud charges, 44 counts. 6 senators face ethics investigations, following defense contract revelations. Whistleblower Protection Act, strengthened. New provisions prevent credential revocation. Martin Systems restructures under independent federal oversight. New board appointed. Vance took a plea deal, Josh said, reading over her shoulder. 22 years, full cooperation. He's naming everyone who signed off on ghost contracts. And you? June asked quietly. House arrest, 5 years. Community service focused on procurement, transparency, education. Josh smiled ruefully. The judge said I was uniquely qualified to teach others how not to steal from the government. I start next month. June nodded. It was more mercy than most would have received, but Josh had earned it through complete cooperation and genuine contrition. The legal system, for once, had recognized the difference between enablement and malice. The Foundation's first dashboard went live yesterday, June said, turning the tablet to show him. On screen was an elegant interface. The Combs Foundation Procurement Transparency Portal. Real-time contract data, automated discrepancy flagging, public comment integration. Everything designed to make hiding easier to expose and exposing easier to do. How many users? 47,000 in the first 24 hours. Journalists, activists, concerned citizens. We've already received 19 tips about potential irregularities. June scrolled to another page, and the micro grant went through. That black lead energy cooperative in South Carolina I mentioned on day one, they got their seed funding. Solar infrastructure for an underserved community. Exactly the kind of investment that should have happened years ago. Josh's expression softened. That's the one you talked about at this table when I asked what you'd do with $1 billion. I remember. June closed the tablet. You thought I was being naive, performative. I was wrong. Josh leaned back. About that. About a lot of things. Their meals arrived, steam rising from perfectly plated dishes. They ate in comfortable silence, the kind that came from shared battles and mutual respect. The power dynamic that had defined their first encounter had dissolved, replaced by something neither had expected. Genuine partnership. I got an email from Marcus, June said between bites. My ex-fiancé. He wanted to apologize. Said watching the hearings made him realize he'd chosen comfort over conscience. What did you say? That I appreciated the acknowledgement, but couldn't offer forgiveness yet. June set down her fork. Some wounds take time, but at least he's aware of them now. Josh nodded, understanding in his eyes. He'd written similar letters himself to employees he'd failed, partners he'd misled, a system he'd enabled. Not all had responded. Some wounds couldn't be healed with words alone. As they finished their meal, the server returned with the check. Josh reached for his wallet, not the black card that had symbolized his arrogance, but a simple leather billfold with a debit card from his grandmother's trust. June placed her hand over his. Split it. We're equals, remember? Josh smiled and nodded. They divided the bill precisely, each paying their share. As the server processed their cards, Josh looked at June with an expression that mixed gratitude, regret, and something harder to name. So, June, still think integrity yields the best return? June met his gaze, seeing the man he'd become layered over the memory of who he'd been. It's the only investment that never loses value. The server returned with their receipts. Josh left a generous tip, not ostentatious, but thoughtful. June did the same. As they stood to leave, June caught sight of their reflection in the restaurant's polished mirrors. A black woman in professional attire and a humbled billionaire, walking out together as partners in something larger than themselves. Outside, the November evening was cool, the Capitol dome glowing white against the darkening skyline. Tourists photographed monuments, staffers hurried between meetings, the machinery of democracy ground on, slightly more transparent than it had been 6 months ago. Same time next month? Josh asked. Same time, June confirmed. We have 3 new whistleblower cases to review and a congressional testimony request. Democracy is messy work. Good thing we're no longer afraid of getting dirty. They parted ways at the corner, Josh heading to his modest apartment in Georgetown, June to her new office space funded by the foundation's initial donors. Neither had everything they'd lost, but both had something more valuable, purpose built on truth rather than buried in lies. As June walked toward the metro, her phone buzzed with a notification. Combs Foundation dashboard alert. Potential discrepancy detected in Energy Department contract number 225 DOE 7743, flagged for review. She smiled and flagged it for tomorrow's investigation. The work never stopped, but neither did her conviction that it mattered. Behind her, in the warm glow of Hamilton and Ivy's windows, her burgundy apron still hung in the staff room, not as a symbol of where she'd been, but as a reminder that truth could emerge from anywhere, spoken by anyone brave enough to answer honestly when powerful people ask the wrong questions. Sometimes the best investment wasn't money at all. It was the courage to choose integrity when everything else was for sale. And that, June had learned, always paid dividends worth more than billions. If this story moved you, share the moment. Don't let it fade. Follow Motherland Stories and tap that like button to keep these voices alive. Every day we uncover strong stories, raw truths, and quiet acts of courage that shape our world. Join a circle of listeners, dreamers, and changemakers. because every story deserves to be heard. This wasn't just an episode, it was a call to remember. Silence hides injustice. Courage exposes it. At Motherland Stories, we don't turn away. We bear witness. Subscribe and stand with stories that challenge power and celebrate truth.